G'day all and welcome back to Shooting the Shit Uncensored. It is me, your host, the bald, the beard, the beautiful Piers Austin, and we are brought to you. I can't even speak tonight. I'm frozen. Damn, that sucks. Sucks to be live. But anyway, we are brought to you live by Multi-Continental Wrestling Alliance on Facebook and on YouTube. You can now find us on Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, you name it, you can find us. And as long as you're finding us, that's all that matters. We have a large audience in the crowd tonight, and I can see it sort of growing. Thank you for tuning in. My guest this evening, man, I'm excited to have this guy on. He's a pro wrestling commentator. He's a podcaster. He's a radio host. This guy's pretty much done it all. He's also spent an extensive amount of time in the music industry. He's been a DJ, you name it. This guy's done it. He's kind of lived the rock and roll lifestyle, and he's still living it, man. His name is Kris Gale, and I'm really excited to be talking to him very, very soon. But before I bring Kris out, let's take a quick second. Let's take a moment. Oh, we got some people in the crowd already. They're commenting. We got Kyle Eade in the house. Good evening, Kyle. Thank you for being the first one to throw a comment up this evening. But guys, let's get into some sponsors. First up is A-Rock Designs. Now, A-Rock Designs is that company you are seeing all over the wrestling Facebook groups, the wrestling pages, the Instagram wrestling pages, the Twitter wrestling pages, and everything and anything. They make custom wrestling cups, hoodies, t-shirts, keychains, tumblers, you name it, they make it. They made me this custom CM Punk tumbler, which is absolutely beautiful. I absolutely love it. Still have not put beer in this cup. It's not because I don't like beer. I love beer. I'm Australian. What Australian doesn't like beer? I just can't put a beer in a CM Punk cup. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I digress. They make great work. Go and check them out. These cups will keep your cold drinks cold and your hot drinks hot. Next up is Signal Studios. Now, Signal Studios is a recording studio based in Sydney, Australia. They helped put together my beautiful intro video from the band The Cicadas, who are an amazing young metal band. So go check those guys out. But Signal Studios, look, if you're a professional wrestler, you're on the indies, you're grinding away, what's one thing that you really need to have? It's a cool entrance music, man. It's something cool to walk to the ring. If you contact Signal Studios, they can mix, master, produce any track that you kind of desire or want or anything on those lines, and they will be able to ship that to you anywhere in the world. Easy as they can just get it to you. Or if you're in Sydney, Australia, and you're a musician, you're a solo artist, you're a band, you want a place to rehearse, you want a place to record, you want a place to, get your creative juices flowing. Well, Signal Studios has the most relaxing, most comfortable space you will find. So please go over and check out Signal Studios on Facebook. Contact my boy Rafi and he will hook you up. But ladies and gentlemen, I've been talking some serious shit besides, mentioning my sponsors, but I think it's time that I bring out my guest, Mr. Kris Gale. How are you, sir?
Piers, I am excellent. Can I just say that opening montage, a lot of famous names on the right-hand side of my screen, but you have more looks than a transformer, my friend. You've just gone through all these different appearances. I loved it.
Thanks, man. It kind of makes me look back over the past year, the changes that I've made, the bald head and all that sort of stuff. But it gets me by, man. But Kris, man, thank you so much for coming on the show. You're someone I've been wanting to get on for quite a while now. We've had the pleasure of speaking at a couple of the past two PWA shows, and I just wanted to get you on the show, man, because I just figured we could have an incredible conversation. How you been, man? Like it's been Christmas here. We're going into New Year's. How's your Christmas, man? Like, you were just saying before it was pretty low key.
Yeah, well, we're here in Sydney, Australia, that was bragging about a month ago about how well we were handling the pandemic, and things have gone a little bit south because of a nefarious area called the Northern Beaches. For those who don't know the Northern Beaches of Sydney, you don't want to go there. They've got a football team called Manly Warringah. Nobody likes them. Nope. And I'm supporting the moves that we have a key entry point called the Spit Bridge, and we should blow that up and just, build a wall. But as a result, Sydney's been a little bit quieter than you normally expect over the festive season. So it has its pluses and minuses. But, Christmas Day, we spent Christmas Eve with some friends who stayed over, and then caught up with my daughter on Christmas Day. And it was family time, man. It was good. And I am relaxed because I'm spending a lot of time horizontal right now.
That's it, man. It's that time of year to try and relax and spend some time, quality time with family, dude. And I think 2020 has been one of those years that can just fuck right off, in my opinion.
No one's going to write it up as a banner year, but I hope Christmas was good for you as well.
Mate, it was very good. You know, got to eat lots of food and got to spend some quality time with the wife and kids. And, you know, as you saw, another little addition on the way. So it's been a very special year.
Thanks, by the way,
man.
It's a fantastic name, no matter what gender you're having. It works, KRIS. And I can tell you what, Christmas 2021, I'm already fired up about A-Rock Design and Signal Studios. I've got those on my shopping list already. So I really want to give a shout out to your sponsors who enable you to do this great show, mate, because that's really, really important. So kudos to them.
It is, man. They're incredible. They do some incredible products, and you know, you can't go wrong with an A-Rock Designs cup. Like, this thing is amazing, especially in the summertime. You know, you can sit here and have a whole thing full of ice and ice water and stuff, and it just keeps it cold the whole day. So it's pretty awesome, dude.
Beautiful.
But you know, Kris, you know, you have a pretty interesting background, man, and you know, prior to getting into the wrestling, also doing podcasting as well. And before that, you know, a musician and a DJ, man. So how did you, obviously, growing up, were you a big wrestling fan? Were you, obviously you've been a big music fan for a very long time as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, here's a news flash. I like music and I like sport, which makes me a bit of a loner, right? Because people aren't into these things. But I certainly grew up in Sydney, very passionate about the sport of cricket when I was a young guy. And then I had a music teacher at school who introduced me to a record called Journey to the Center of the Earth by Rick Wakeman, who was a progressive rock keyboard player in a band called Yes. And that was my touchstone for becoming and remaining a huge music fan. One of the things that I remember from the 70s was a show that used to be on Channel 9 called World Championship Wrestling. Yeah. And for those of a particular vintage, they'll remember that show with great fondness, because it was really coming off the back of a time when professional wrestling was a huge entertainment medium in this country. I mean, the heyday of professional wrestling, the 50s and the 60s, and these performers would come out and wrestle in places that aren't here now, like the Sydney Stadium. But by the time World Championship Wrestling was on, Festival Hall in Melbourne and the Hordern Pavilion in Sydney, Saturday sort of midday-ish was my memory of seeing those shows. And so I was, a young kid, really interested in sport, and kind of attracted to and somewhat confused by the interviews that the competitors would give, before or during or after their matches. It wasn't the typical microphone in the showers with a rugby league player saying, yeah, we played good, we tried hard. There was something otherworldly about what I was hearing and seeing. And so I have really clear early memories of professional wrestling that way. There's a great documentary that came out made by the son of Sheikh Wadi Ayoub, who was one of the big stars of that era, where you can see some of that archival footage, and it'll be on YouTube as well. But I was actually thinking in the lead up to this interview, what really cemented me to professional wrestling was, funnily enough, Ian Chappell, former Australian cricket captain, and Mike Gibson, a journo, used to have a show called The Wide World of Sport on Saturday afternoons on Channel 9. And it was really like a sports magazine show. And one of the things they would show, and there was clearly someone in the production team who was a fan, was WWF footage, generally from Madison Square Garden. And there, apart from the Hogans and the Andres, you'd be seeing Rowdy Roddy Piper, Ivan Putski. My God, I loved Ivan Putski. The Fabulous Lawler, Chief J Strongbow, just this cavalcade of stars. Jimmy Superfly Snuka, of course, stood out for the exact reason they called him Superfly, coming off the top rope. And they were just like these little banner moments why I'd watch Wide World of Sports. And that was really my entree into professional wrestling that got me kind of hooked. And then Channel 10 started to show the WWF Superstars of Wrestling, I think it was, in the early 80s. And that was all she wrote.
Yeah, man. Like, I can sort of vividly remember that. Like, I was born in the 80s. You know what I mean? Like, so
You're younger than me. I didn't realize that. Okay.
only slightly, bro. Only slightly, dude. You got more hair than I do, so you're younger than I do, dude.
It's a
So,
piece.
but that's the thing. I remember, like, obviously the beginning area. Like, I remember sort of vaguely seeing WrestleMania 1, like bits of it when I was like really, really young. And when you rewatch that now as an adult, you sort of get flashbacks to that memory. And for me, it was like always Hulk Hogan was that sort of guy that I think any kid from the 80s is always going to say, like, Hogan is the thing that drew them in. But, you mentioned, Wide World of Sports in Australia and some of the talent that they had on there. I've gone back and watched a lot of those shows. Yeah. And, the talent that they had, Mario Milano, I'm just trying to, Andy Harpus as well.
Arion was a huge figure, and you used to get all the internationals as well. I remember in our high school, we were just all blown away when Haystacks Calhoun came to Australia because he was such a big man, and of course there were front pages of the newspapers the size of this man's overalls and whatever, and Haystacks Calhoun became I guess in the schoolyard when you sat on someone you did a haystacks on them and things like that. So those memories were sort of, really being built at an early age about what professional wrestling was and what it could be. And Australia was a destination place. I was going to say if you go, there's one storyline. I mean, they didn't really do story arcs so much, but one that they did near the end of the run, because I think it finished in about 1973, you might have heard about, was The War.
Yes.
And the War was, there was an American biker character, and he got, look, I think he got Japanese and German wrestlers into his faction, and I think one of them it actually ended up being Mr. Fuji, a manager in WWF.
Oh, wow.
And they took on the other faction, which were the new Australians, as they were referred to, the immigrants from Europe in the 50s. So Spiros Arion, Mario Milano, Sheikh Wadiaou, Greece, Italy, Lebanon, and they were running a story which was pretty close to the Second World War, and of course, the public ate it up. And Mike Cleary, who played first grade rugby league for, I think it's Australia, it's South Sydney, and then went on to represent his country, was the commentator. And the footage has the war being played out in the ring. And of course, they just had a static camera in those days. There was no wandering camera. And a lot of the wrestlers in those days, they were pretty loose. Right? Yeah. And it spills out into the arena, and it actually goes out onto that road that is actually between the Hordern Pavilion and Max Watts, which of course is where PWA puts its shows on. And they're outside fighting each other for more than 10 minutes. And Cleary simply has to commentate to an empty ring because there was no capacity to follow the action. And I think it was pretty willing out there. And that sort of adventurous spirit is why I love professional wrestling, I think.
That's the thing, man. And like the world of pro wrestling, and I was saying this when I had Nikki Van Blair on last week, it's pro wrestling is just it's the most unique thing in the world, and it has a spot for everybody. You know what I mean? Like it's like it's just like it's one of those most universal things that it's like it's. You know what I mean? That it doesn't matter race, look, style, anything like that, what they can bring in, but also the fact that to keep something going, like not calling the action in an empty ring, to have that level of confidence to be able to continue, like just like you know what I mean? Like you've been commentating for a while now for PWA. Like, could you imagine like there's no camera and two guys just leaving outside the building and you have to sit there and just live cam?
I'd give it a crack. And look, I caught your interview with Nikki. And Nikki, if you're out there, I know you're doing personal image consultancy for Reece Angel. I need some help. So I'm available. I need some consulting.
There you go. We'll put that in a clip and put that out. So, we'll make sure Nikki sees it. But, it's like, going back, like you're like, your love for wrestling obviously started at a young age, and by the sounds of what you were saying, it's like promos were the thing that really drew you in because it was something different, unique, and different from the typical sports, backstage sort of, or back in the sheds type of interview.
Well, because in sport, you're taught to win with grace and lose with dignity, and congratulate your opponent and respect them. And it was odd, but these guys seem to hate their opponents and not respect them. And as a kid, I'm going, well, that's a little unusual, but there's a sort of an honesty to that really, really appeals. And of course, I think the great promos of wrestling, and why it's a feature that I often focus on a lot, it reflects great talent and innovation and incredible humor at times. And that was something that's never left me. And, we went through some pretty tough times here in terms of professional wrestling in Australia. And this is why the emergence of the industry over the last few years has been so encouraging and exciting, that I did a little bit of research, Piers, for this show, as to going, okay, well, I'm now watching it on Channel 10 and WrestleMania is happening. And I of course, clearly remember WrestleMania 1 as being for the honor of Cyndi Lauper. I was wondering why this guy, Captain Lou Albano, had rubber bands on his face, but I accepted that. And, and as a rock and roll fan, you're going, it's Cyndi Lauper into Liberace, into Alice Cooper with Jake the Snake. I'm going, this is pretty good stuff. Yeah. And I remember, wow, I love watching this stuff. And then, of course, it deserted our screens for a long time until cable TV came along. But I went back and I researched, now, of course, the WWE, but the first WWF show that I went to, and it was the old Sydney Entertainment Centre in 1985. And a group of us went, and one of my friends, Johnny, age 17, turned to me at the end of the show and he goes, "This has been the greatest night of my life." Johnny's now turned 50, married, beautiful child, still claims that night was the greatest night of his life.
Wow. Wow. Do you remember that? Who was on the card? Like who?
Well, of course, I remember certain things, and I'll tell you the bits I remember, and then I'll go and I've got the card in front of me. But there were a couple of highlights. There were two. There was a women's match. Leilani Kai defeated Susan Starr. Now, what I remember about that was the state government tried to stop it. That they were not comfortable with two women battling each other, and it was the lead-up story as that they were trying to stop that match taking place. Now, the official record says that it did take place. So that was sort of, in a way, that was the story that promoted the show. It was a big crowd, but here's what I remember most clearly. Nikolai Volkov and the Iron Sheik wrestled Jumping Jim Brunzell and B. Brian Blair, the Killer Bees, in single competition, right? And, of course, the Sheik is one of the first people I remember, because if I'm remembering correctly, I think that's who Hogan beat to win the belt. And that's correct. And, of course, that was tapping into the sort of the sentiment of the time, the Soviet Union, and I think the Sheik was Iranian, rather than Iraqi, if I'm remembering correctly. And I know he was an Iranian. And so, they were sort of targets for, Western enmity. And Volkov's shtick, of course, was that he requested that everyone be upstanding for the singing of the Soviet national anthem. Yeah. And so, of course, this part of the show absolutely sticks in my mind. The ring announcer requests us to be upstanding. We are on our feet instantly, right? And the Soviet flag is there, and it's a dun, 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 like this. And people all around us are yelling at us, "Sit down. He's a communist. What are you doing?" And my friend turned to the baying crowd and he said, "Listen, the man is a guest in our country. The least we can do is show him some respect for his national anthem."
Oh, what a mark.
He barely gets halfway through when Jumping Jim Brunzell pulls out the Australian flag from his trunks and starts strangling Volkov with the flag. And so we get through it. And, of course, in the end, Brunzell and B. Brian Blair defeated Volkov and the Iron Sheik. The other names that really stand out was Adrian Adonis, I think, who we lost, sadly, way too young. I think had just moved into his adorable Adrian period, sort of echoing Gorgeous George. And he beat Special Delivery Jones. I want to give a shout-out to my friend Brett Jones, who I still call Special Delivery. And then the main event, Iron Mike Sharp, which I'm not really vibing on, but he was beaten by the Junkyard Dog. And to me, the Junkyard Dog, who just had the word thump on the back of his trunks was the paragon of mid-'80s professional wrestling. And as Johnny said, it was one of the great nights of our lives.
What? Listening to some of the legends that you just got to see live back in in their prime when you were a kid, like that is pretty amazing, and like that would be the best night of anyone's life. Like I think if you go back, it's like, and that's the thing, to have that and to be that big of a fan to be able to enjoy it and still look back and be such a massive highlight.
Well,
it must have been quite the event.
It really was, and you're sort of kind of fortunate to be able to get to go to these events, to be able to afford to go to them. And there is a little bit of ticking of boxes. I mean, the next show I went to was 2000, which was the Monday Nitro show, WCW, again in the Entertainment Center, and that I think was actually went back live to the United States, and so there were belts on the lines and things like that.
Yeah,
the biggest. I don't know. Do you say anti-pop when they boo? I don't know. Is that the right thing?
I think so. I think it. Like, I don't know, heat seeker or getting heat.
Yeah. Right. Well, the biggest bit of heat all night was when they threw up an image of a patron arriving and taking his seat in the arena. It was Kerry Packer, and the crowd just booed him senseless, which I thought was hilarious. But I remember Ric Flair came out that night, just made an appearance. I researched it, but Sting defeated Jeff Jarrett, was a big one. Booker T defeated Scott Steiner, who seemed to be wrestling the entire night in various forms. There were rumbles and things, and Big Papa Pump went down to Booker T. But the personal highlight was we were seated on the floor, and on the left-hand side was one of the entry doors to the floor of the Entertainment Center, and the door opened, and you just saw a torch sort of waving. And I was there with my mate, Madge, who's not well at the moment. So big shout out to Madge. And so our eyes, of course, immediately trained on this entrance. And at the entrance appeared, and I think it was for, it may well have been for the Sting match. No, I think it was Booker T, actually. It was Booker T who was going to help Booker T. But there is Goldberg, right? And my friend Madge just automatically screams, pointing at the entrance, and he goes, "It's Goldberg!" And Goldberg looks over us and he goes, "Shh!" Like he didn't want his entrance spoiled, and that was just amazing. So you start to collect legends, and I went down to the Global Warning show down in Melbourne, which I'm looking at my facts was August the 10th, 2002, and lots of stories there. But I mean, one of the non-stories was that Hogan didn't come. He had a back injury, I think. And so disappointed was I in not seeing Hogan that when he came out for that sort of unofficial promotion called Hulkamania, where he wrestled Ric Flair not that long ago, I
remember that.
Just to bear witness, you know what I mean? And then we headed down to Super Showdown, if for no other reason, because we were a long, long way from the action to see the Taker.
Oh, dude. Man, that's some crazy stories, man. Being able to go back to those shows. I remember going to a WCW house show when they came to Australia, because that's pretty much all we got in 2000 and stuff. And I remember going to that show, and then like they had live commentary, which I think was Conan and something else. But then I also went to, do you remember the WWA shows, the World Wrestling All? Was it? I don't know if it's World Wrestling All Star or something.
Yeah, no.
WWA. Yeah, it was like the Australian version of TNA, because it was like Jeff Jarrett was involved, and I think it was done by McManus. I can't remember his first name. Yeah. He was the promoter for it, and it was kind of like just when WCW had closed, so it was pretty much predominantly WCW talent.
Yes,
coming
I remember
out.
this. Yes.
Yeah. I was at the first pay-per-view, and it wasn't too bad. It was a pretty good show, man, because a lot of those guys were still obviously just fresh of being on WCW television. But yeah, man, like that, those were some pretty good shows to be able to get to. But getting into pro wrestling yourself, like your way, like how you and Rose got into pro wrestling, into PWA is so unique, and it's so like To me, it was just a really cool story of how you guys sort of came to work with PWA. Like, I just thought it was pretty cool, man.
Well, so you're talking about Andrew Rose, of course, my co-commentator at PWA, and I actually heard your interview with him. And do you remember Wolverine X-Men's Origins? Like, pretty bad movie, right? Like, Rose's origin story about us is completely fabricated. Like, all this stuff he went on about, signed to my record, it's all made up. Basically, what happened was I signed up for a corporate outreach program for talentless kids. And, they call it fourth and final chance. And I got allocated Rose, trying to give the kids some sort of leg up. And look, I've tried DJing with the kid, podcasting with the kid, commercial radio, and now professional wrestling. So it's really just a community service as to how we ended up together. But no, you're absolutely right. It came about as Rose described in his chat with you through the fact that we happened to talk about professional wrestling on a commercial radio station in Sydney, and not do the typical commercial broadcast thing, which is
take the piss.
As a figure of is something to be mocked or made fun of, and without boring your viewers and listeners too much. The story was State of Origin. It's a big deal in Australia. It's the sort of showpiece of rugby league where the two states, Queensland and New South Wales, who hate each other now more than ever after the pandemic, let me tell you. The great Queenslander Jonathan Thurston was retiring, and Rose opined that it would be wonderful if Thurston ran on to his final game in the maroon jersey of Queensland and did a heel turn and stripped off and played for the Blues and won the Origin series. And we were lucky enough that New Japan Pro Wrestling superstar Robbie Eagles, who of course is really one of the core elements of PWA, was listening that evening, and he reached out to Rose, I believe, via Twitter and said, "Hey, look, it's just great to hear you guys talking respectfully and entertainingly about pro wrestling. Come to a show." And then Rose pioneered. I think he was lucky enough to be at the show where Ospreay and Eagles wrestled in Paddington, and off the back of that, he said, "Kriss, you must come." And so we headed out to Parramatta RSL on an extremely hot January evening in 2018. So it's, getting up to almost 3 years ago now. And like everyone who sees PWA and great local Australian product, as someone who's sort of, I guess, steeped in all that history that I was droning on about just a moment ago, I went in with my guard up. Sounds like I'm on The Bachelor, doesn't it? And and I really was so impressed by what I saw that evening, and I said to Rose, "How great is this? This is terrific. I'm coming again for sure." And timing was in our favour because PWA was just in the throes of securing Matt Watts as its spiritual home, which it has been, and I'm sure will be again as we come out of the pandemic. And they were doing sort of synced digital commentary to the film stuff they were doing, and they were developing this great film crew. And they were just looking for people who'd be prepared to commentate, and that would go on their paywall. And so I think, we sold our soul for Rock and Robbie. I think from memory might have been that first show. And they were really just taking a punt on us. And, it wasn't live streamed. If we were terrible, there was no downside. We were terrible. There was a downside, but they decided to persist with us, and it went from there. And I must go back at some stage and hear how bad we were, because we really were neophytes, and we've learned lots in that period. Most of all, that the most important figure in PWA is, of course, the officials like referee Nick, who I've got here on my shirt.
But you mentioned you've never done any pro wrestling commentary before, correct? Like, this was something complete. Yeah.
Well, just endless hours in front of my TV at home by myself, Piers. But we don't talk about that because my therapist says it's probably something I should move on from. But yeah.
Hey man, haven't we all sat in front of a TV and called a wrestling match before, bro? It's like my wife actually asked me, do I ever take one of these belts down and walk around the house with it around my waist when no one's home? And I'm like, no, that would be silly. But but I think that
clothed or naked, because if it was naked, then of course you've walked around with the belt.
Oh, please, come on now. How do you think we got number 3?
Exactly.
But so how did you prepare going into that first lot of like recordings for doing pro wrestling?
Look, when I think about it, if we're talking about how the promos attracted me as a kid. The thing when I started to watch the American content that we were seeing was I loved the commentary, right? And I immediately in my mind go to Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse the Body Ventura, right? You've got Gorilla doing the play-by-play, basically, on the side of the right, and then Ventura giving this strong counterpoint voice. And I said, first of all, that guy's going to become governor of Minnesota. I will bet my life on it. And secondly, that repartee just absolutely entranced me. And I thought Vince McMahon was an excellent commentator as well, because he was so they used that word verisimilitude. He was just so truthful about what he was saying that it carried you along. And I avoid trying to mimic anyone, but occasionally I do give Ventura a shout out in the call and I say, I'm impressed, McMahon, and I don't impress easy, right? and to me, and then Heenan came in commentary, and I guess I've spent a lot of time listening to what I like, and then I guess what you get out of that is saying, well, if you're in that situation, what's your style, and what do you want to be? And I know Rose and I, when we first started, were a little bit too jokey, and we probably didn't quite have the verisimilitude. And of course, the other thing that's a huge setback is that, we're coming off the back fence in terms of the incredibly deep knowledge that the wrestlers have about the moves and so forth. There are all the range of moves, and then there are the variants of the moves, and then there are the moves like in professional skating that get named after the person who creates them, and then the brand names that people impose. And we probably were smart enough not to try to call what we didn't know, and just try and convey the excitement, tell the story as we see it. Our poor attempts at humor has always been part of it. And then if the company was open to us to learn and to tell us more, we would just, and we have put our sort of, we're open for business sign. And I think from the perspective of the PWI wrestlers, and I'd agree with Rose, and let me tell you, I never agree with Rose, but I agree with what he said in your interview, which is quite rightly, I think that the wrestlers were somewhat wary of who we were, what our motivation was, why were we doing it? Was it just something that we thought would be a bit of promo for us in the station or whatever? I hope now, 3 years in, that we respect the profession, we love what we do, and we love them. And so I have to be honest, I have the easier job because I'm Rose does the play-by-play, and I'm trying to, I guess, represent almost what the casual viewer is seeing to a degree.
The color.
Yeah, the color. But it's not. I'd be lying if I said it was difficult. And you listen back and you see the mistakes and whatever. But you're just constantly going, "This is a privilege." And I think one of the things that Rose and I do reflect on is say, "How did this ever happen, man? This is just like such a fortuitous opportunity for us." And there hasn't been 1 minute of it where I've said, "I'd rather be somewhere else," or "I wish I was doing somewhere else." And there's a huge desire to get better. And that's what, we're hoping to do going forward. But I think the one bit of preparation that I had was just, I was definitely someone who listened to the commentary. Like, I think lots of people watch the action and whatever, but to me, the commentators were enormous personalities in developing my love for wrestling. So hopefully that informed the way I've approached it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I said this to Rose, and he didn't agree with me because I believe, pro wrestling and commentating, it's like the music is the pro wrestling, okay? The lyrics is the commentating, and they have to be able to flow together. And like a good commentator can make a match so much more spectacular. And you know what I mean? But the same thing, what the performers are putting in the ring is what the commentators are working with. So, you know what I mean? Like you see at a high level, like a good commentator, like someone like a Jim Ross and stuff like that, knowing when to sort of, the high spots and how to control that sort of stuff. That's the way I look at it. Rose, when he was on, said, no, I think that the whole song is happening in the ring. But for me, it's like I think the commentary always adds to the flavor of the match.
Well, it's really interesting. I think one of the things you hear lots of sports commentators as to what makes a good commentator say things like, don't say things that people can already see, right? And I think that that in certain sports is true, but I think in wrestling there's an expectation that there is a level of knowledge and a descriptive knowledge that calls certain events as they occur. So I think there is an obligation a little bit to call what you see. But then if you can, because of your vantage point, and your vantage point is they generally give you a good view, though the Thunder Liger show was so successful, which was a collaboration between PWA and the Farley Dojo last December in 19 that they sold out the Factory Theatre. They had to put all the seats on the stage. We couldn't see the ring from where we were sitting. We either had to stand up or call it off the monitors. But generally, you have a good vantage point, right? So we've got a good vantage point plus a monitor. So we probably see things that certainly the crowd might miss, but for the people who are watching online or on delay, we're hopefully training in on things and helping them steer their eye a little bit around. And of course, they're two different mediums. This is the thing that, as I'm persuading friends and colleagues to come to shows, and they come back, let me tell you, they love it so much. But, a lot of people are disappointed. Well, actually, no, they're generally pretty pleased when they go, I thought I'd hear you commentate, but I was delighted to hear you at a live show. I can't hear you. But a lot of people expect to hear that. And I know there are some promotions that do that, but I mean, they really are two distinct things. A live wrestling show and then a wrestling show that's on a screen. And I think we're definitely part of the second, and in a minor way can be part of the first. And, I'll immediately go to the highlight of when, I don't know, you may not be aware of this, but I'm quite a fan of a wrestler in PWA called Matthew Wahlberg. I like the cut of that guy's jib. And
I actually quite like him too, man. He's a cool dude.
And when he was wrongfully denied a victory for the heavyweight belt against Caveman Ugg, at one point he did put Ugg through our announce table, and I was 10 centimeters from needing a shin transplant, let me tell you. But you live for those moments, and hopefully you're selling something to the crowd as well, that they don't see you as an impediment, but hopefully helping enhance their experience by your reactions. I mean, I think one of the things the PWA referees do a brilliant job is, emphasize the incredible things when they happen, and provide discipline when they need to, and occasionally just step back and go, Matt, that was pretty bloody good.
Yeah, like that's the thing that I like about the overall product with PWA. Like, a lot of it is, when I came to that first show, Wrist Locks and Pile Drivers, I've been putting over PWA since then. And, I'd been to a PWA show a couple years beforehand. And, going to the Wrist Locks and Pile Driver show, like, I left that and had friends that are overseas going, hey, how was the Aussie wrestling show? Yeah. And I was like, let me tell you something about PWA, brother. And then I was, like that. And I said that was on the level of any major promotion I've ever seen. From in-ring talent to production was like, as far as like an independent wrestling promotion, which what every promotion in Australia is, the thing was like completely different to what I'd seen from an Aussie wrestling promotion, but also the quality of it was just as good as like a Ring of Honor or a, New Japan, for my opinion. And that's what I went back and said. And I was sending people clips. I saw them on Twitter and Facebook and sharing them, saying, guys, check this shit out. And, a lot of people were just like, what the fuck? Like, this is amazing. And the overall product is definitely, on a level which is just far beyond. And it's just where Australian wrestling is at, and PWA being at the forefront of it, it's amazing. The
first thing that occurs to me when I hear that, Piers, is can't wait for you to see a show in a larger arena, because we're wrestling out of that show, Wrist Locks and Pile Drivers, out of our Pro Wrestling Academy out in Inglewood in southwest Sydney. So, a full production show will enhance your experience. Plus, we'll be able to go to the pub nearby for a beer afterwards, which is something, we've just had brief chats at these shows, and I look forward to that. what you're reflecting is the quality of the people. I'm trying to understand where these guys come from, but I'm saying this was essentially a group of young people who were seeing professional wrestling on their screens through cable TV and the internet and whatever, and going, I want to do that here. And the game was in, I think, precipitous decline in Australia. And whilst there were a few totems that they could go and consult with and talk about, they really had to do it themselves. And I think they've done it the right way. And I think the crucible of that is the academy process they have and the training and the expectations. But the dedication that these athletes put in is, really, really amazing. And that is the most frustrating thing for me about the fact that we've had to lock down and only recently been lucky enough to do shows in front of 50 people. And by the way, the 50 people such as yourself, God, it makes a difference. It's just so great to have people there, is that they haven't had the platform to display their talents where they want to display them the most. We've got a premiership going on now with 2 rounds left, and it's building to a crescendo, which has been a great Monday night online experience on OVO Play through the PWA platform. But it is the crowd. I mean, you don't have the full gig, mate, if you've just got the songs and the lyrics and no crowd.
100%.
Yeah, but it's the people, and it's the administration. It's the trying to understand issues they occur and respond appropriately. The film crew, sort of that. Ben, who's the producer of it, was at the film and television school, and he's got mad skills. If anyone saw the Bonza coming back from the Wilderness promo, that'll speak to Ben Alexander's skills. And thank God he was a wrestling fan. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm in awe of this group of people, and I'm definitely skewed in terms of the age demographic, and I feel really blessed that they allow me to be part of it.
Yeah, that's one thing. And I just say, everyone in the audience, I know I put over PWA, but seriously, they are that damn good. The feeling you get at the shows. I've been to 3 PWA Academy shows, and the overall
Alexander. Sorry about that, mate. Ben
that's
just
that whole feeling of a community, like just the care that they have for people and the care that they have of their performers and for each other, and also the fans of their product as well. And being able to meet some of these amazing fans of PWA and hearing some of their stories about how, like, when they've had dark times and been at PWA shows, how the people from PWA have come around them and drawn them in just to make sure that they're okay. And in the world of pro wrestling, which, to see that sort of teamwork, that camaraderie, and that love and care for people around them is, in the pro wrestling world, it's very rare. You know what I mean? Like, it's it's always been a dog eat dog world, and who's going to try and take that next spot. And with PWA, it's that's not the case, and you can sort of sense that just being at the shows. And me being fortunate enough to speak to many of the PWA roster have all sort of said very similar sentiments.
I think you're right, and my hope is, when as part of that community outreach program, I had to DJ with Rose. We DJ'd in the Sydney club scene. It's kind of the middle of last decade. God, it's the second half of last decade. And Sydney's gone through this terrible social reform prior to lockdowns, called lockouts, which, ripped the cultural fabric of the city apart, and we haven't recovered from it. But we were lucky enough to be performing prior to that. And in that scene, so many people emerged out of the fact that you could play clubs, 2-3 clubs a night, 2 or 3 nights a weekend, that sort of thing, have gone on to international success, right? So domestic success and international success, and so much of it, part of it was such a great group of people. Again, I felt welcomed into someone whose advanced years meant that they refer to him as the Godfather, and good people produced quality music, and they've gone on to sustain success. That's what I've identified in the PWA that I've been in the time I've been involved. This is a group of talented, like-minded, good people, and hopefully I can help them be part of success. And I think, obviously in the American and Japan promotions, we can see Australians, we saw Jonah, the Rock Monster, or was it Jonah the Monster Rock? I always get that away. Lose to Ugg in a cage match that we called to go on to be Bronson Reed in NXT and things like that. The very first match I ever went to, the impressive Indy Hartwell did bounce out in front of us, so she was bounced out in the ring by the great Jason McKenzie and goes, "Did I win?" And I want to be part of that talent getting that opportunity and exposure. And it's, yes, for the prospects that are offered overseas, but also to try and build a more meaningful business in this country. And, aspire to the Horton Pavilion being across the road as a place that we can routinely do shows, maybe, a little bit like the PWA Annual Coliseum where you've got interstate and overseas talent, but you're getting the numbers that justify it from an economics point of view. It's tough in Australia. You can't be like the United States where you've got a couple of hundred cities where you can put on a decent show at any particular night. We're a diffracted market, geographically split apart. But I think with online and live stream and major cities, I'd love to be part of a business that employs a lot of professional wrestlers and people in the industry meaningfully in this country, because let's be honest, at the moment, so many of them are doing it for the love of the calling, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I completely agree with you. I would love to be part of that business.
Yeah.
Like that to me is like, I think that we're probably a few years off from that, man. And, you're seeing, like, I've gone back and watched some PWA shows on Ovo Play, and some of the footage that I've seen from like some of those Max Watch shows, and everyone I speak to about PWA who has been says you got to go to a Max Watch show. You got to go to a Max Watch show. Like, those shows are ridiculous, and seeing them on, streaming is going to be completely different to the live event itself. I can tell, but just seeing what I saw on some of these some footage of past shows, it's been absolutely like ridiculous, like that sort of atmosphere.
Max Watts is a great venue. It's gone through a number of names. It was called the Forum, where I saw a Too Many DJ / Soulwax show to die for a long time ago. Then it became part of the High Five group, and now it's Max Watts. It's a venue in Mardi Gras. I've seen Sophie Alex Bextor sing there. A band called Mute Math. And then we even, as in my group, Hey Now, it was a corporate gig, and we came on after the presets. So we've always said that the preset supported us, but anyway, that's another story. So to walk in and call that as your first show and be sort of perched up on the stage was incredible, because it has a drama to it. It has its walls are quite dark. It sort of lights black. I mean, a bit like an NXT type look. And you've got a mezzanine. You might have heard Jude the Dude London in the mezzanine once in Headhunter Rig. That's a story in itself. And so you've got that sort of slight Coliseum effect, no pun intended, where you've got pundits standing up looking down on the ring. There's a mate of mine, Alex Donnelly, who gets his same spot on the mezzanine because he rates it better than being front row. He wants to sort of strategically oversee the action, and then you get the ring on a nice flat floor with seats around it, and bars for people to jump off. I remember Madison Eagles just catapulting off a bar. It was just extraordinary stuff. So there's an inherent drama to that venue, and one of the challenges of PWA is you always want to go into other venues where you can get a similar effect. You just don't want to be big for the sake of it. I mentioned the Liger show at the Factory Theatre, very different setup, almost like a lit arena as opposed to a dark one, different energy, but really raucous. And I think tough stuff, Ricky South. And when will that man get a chance to take on Caveman Ugg for the heavyweight belt? I ask you.
I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be
lockdown, seriously. I mean, I've been petitioning Daniel Andrews, the Victorian Premier, and Gladys Berejiklian on a weekly basis to make it happen. But I think Ricky, from memory, slapped Lyrebird Lucci, as he's now known, with a chop that was actually heard down at Sydney Airport. It's sort of, the flight traffic controller said there was a bit of a blip on the radar. It was that loud. So we're in these venues, and there's a rumor we might be back in the Factory in February. I don't know if you heard that there was a little taster earlier this month. Did you hear about that, Piers?
Yeah. I heard that you guys might be going back early in the new year.
Yeah, so there's a rumor that we might be back in the factory in February, but PWA helped launch a record by the great Australian rock band, the Pissed Idiots. Certainly one of my favourite. Right up there with that.
That's such an Aussie name for a band.
There's always room for bogan rock, all right? Be it the Chats, Skeggs, or Amel and the Sniffers, there's always room for bogan rock. And they had a record launch a couple of weeks ago for a new single called Street Fighter. So we set up a ring, and so the punters arrived in 2 sittings. It's just like a restaurant now. There's like the 6:30 sitting and the 9 sitting, and they were treated to 3 matches. Tough stuff against Prefect Jimmy Townsend. Charlie Evans was up against Jess Troy, the arm collector, and then you saw my guy Wahlberg and the prize bull Sam Osborne against Moretti, who Rose's bias towards Mick Moretti is just sickening. I insist on social distancing when I commentate with him because I don't want to listen to his simpering worship of Mick Moretti and Jack J. Bonza. And so the punters got 3 quality matches. And what was great about that, saying this in the correct way, it wasn't a PWA crowd. The PWA fans weren't there. These were the fans of the band. And it was a real test because are they going to come in and go, oh, wrestling man, we're going to have a real crack at this and make fun of it? By the time Charlie Evans had been dropped by Jess on 4 chairs in the middle of the ring, they were entranced, and we held that crowd. I saw the later show. We held that crowd all the way through. So no one went off for a drink or anything like that. That's the sort of exposure and the pathway we're on of trying to get this across to other people.
Man, I saw the advertisement for that show, man. I couldn't actually come to it. I actually was like, yeah, I'll go, but due to work commitments, I couldn't make it. Sounding of those 3 matches though, that's pretty amazing though. Like for you guys to put on like 3 amazing matches like that, I think that even if they weren't wrestling fans at all and they had that whole intention of just sitting there and shitting on the product, you can't shit on that sort of like crowd. That those matches no one could shit on. Like they would have like won people over instantly. You know?
But that's the challenge, isn't it? And and I can imagine they were feeling that pressure, so they really went all out. And I mean, you did miss out because at one stage you did see the bare butt of Ricky South, just momentarily. But again, that was another chop that was heard down at Sydney Airport on the radar. But yeah, these are the sorts of things that as we come out of the lockdown that we want to do. We want to get all Australian indie wrestling, who's Indy Hartwell's new nickname, I believe, out.
Indie wrestling.
Yeah, that was Johnny Gargano's Christmas present to her. Your new name is Indie Wrestling.
Jesus.
Yeah, I know. and appeal to different audiences. I did briefly. I think one of the things that I'm involved with is the West Tigers, which is an NRL club, one of the professional rugby league clubs in Australia. And I've had a long association with the club, which I've now attached to PWA. And this year was a bit of a bust, but next year we'll be doing co-promotion events both with the men and women's teams. We went and saw the gym the other day. So I'm giving my sponsorship, that I provide personally to PWA to connect with the Tigers because we want a broader audience. And the situation, we're at a end of season sponsors event, which is the only one they could do. And I'm talking to guys, some of my ilk, younger people, the players, of course. And you go to a player like Luciano Leilua. I hear you're called Ric Flair. Is that just press or are you a wrestling fan? He goes, oh, my God, I'm a Ric Flair fan. I'm a huge Eddie Guerrero guy. And I said, well, we're a wrestling company. He goes, I want to be a piece of that. You speak to so many people who go, I loved it when I was 16, 17, and then I kind of lost touch with it. We want to get people back connected with that. And the Tiger CEO, Justin Pascoe, claims that he's happy to go into a cage match with UGG. And when we mentioned that, he came up and re-mentioned it to me the other day. And so when we mentioned that to the players and he's their boss, they all go, oh, please put him in a cage. We will pay good money this. And that Rugby League Association is partly because I did see a question flash up from Joel Southgate about the new Newcastle Knights prospects in the Rugby League next year. Joel, if you have a house, don't put it on the Knights. And Mitchell Piers will not be your captain. He'll understand what that means.
Yeah, that's some crazy shit, right? With Mitchell Piers.
It's another passion of mine, Piers, and I'm not going to detract from what we're talking about now. But yeah, that's another crazy piece of shit. That's for sure.
I saw that the other day. I was like, what the fuck?
You know, and I say this to all members of the wrestling community as well. This might be a shock, but if you send a text to someone and then you delete it on your phone, that doesn't mean that it's disappeared. All right, it's just track for young players out there.
Yeah, jeez, and don't play with puppy dogs. But
no, well, yeah.
But you know, getting back on track to where we were before we went on a little bit of off there. You know, as far as like now being a part of PWA and being one of the interviews, one of the commentators, I should say. You know, is it a desire in you to sort of learn more about the business itself? Like, do you see yourself wanting to get more involved in like the booking of shows and, you know, what goes into the storyline development, or is that something that you're already involved in?
Look, I think one of the things I mentioned before earlier was that Rose and I, the last thing we wanted to come in was do anything other than what we've been asked to do.
For sure.
And because we understood that, you know, again, who are these guys? What's their motivation? What's their credibility? I think over time, I believe that, you know, we've been able to add value. The introduction to OVO came through my network, the Tigers sponsorship, because I'm very passionate about this company being successful.
100%.
So I'm a business person by nature. I've sort of operated. I've been in my business for 35 years. I've, you know, owned it outright for a large portion of time. I'm now sort of selling down, but I'm very interested in businesses and how they work. And building value is always a challenge. And so I'm certainly up for any gig that PWA would like me to be involved with, because I feel part of the organization and I'm interested in how that works, because, you know, like anything, this is around networking and aspirations. Like, where's the best place for our product to be staged? What venue should we be operating on at what level? What, as the business gets more mature, what are the checks and balances you need to put in place? How should it be best seen? Who's the right vision partner going forward? All those things are really dynamic. And also, you know, always have, I think, a little bit of aspiration. One of the radio stations I work with is a station in Sydney called FBI Radio, which is an alternative arts music culture station. It's really the ground zero for Sydney artists, electronic musicians, bands, performers on their way to some sort of commercial success. And they rely on subscriptions and sponsorships. So one year, someone within the organization came up with the idea, we're doing our next sponsorship drive, and part of what we want is ideas of how we can get Richard Branson to donate $1 million to FBI Radio. All right. So the short answer was, in the end, he didn't, but Virgin provided a lot of in-kind support, like prizes, air flights, all that sort of thing, like I think tens of thousands of dollars of support, and it got media attention. Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and you never know. Branson and his empire go, you know what? I really want to support a little bit of that trap music that's coming out of inner city glebe in Sydney. So why won't I donate the money to the station? Part of me says, I mentioned Kerry Packer before. James Packer looks like a wrestling fan to me. You know, like
100%.
I just
100%.
love. I love the story in the Monday Night Wars. You know, when Vince describes the call from Ted Turner, you know, the CNN Supremo and former America's Cup winning yachts person, and let's face it, married to Jane Fonda. And he goes, Vince, I'm in the wrestling business. And I just think a large part of it was he just wanted to do it. You know, like
you know what the thing is, I think with Ted Turner, I think he was a huge fan of wrestling, and I think he was just a huge money mark, dude. Same with, like, look at Tony Khan. Tony Khan wanted to live his dream of hanging around wrestlers and running a wrestling promotion and had the money to do it, and AEW was born. So, dude, if you've got money and you're a wrestling fan, your dream is possible.
Is that the guy who died exactly how he wanted to die? But Twiggy Forrest, he looks like he's into rugby union. He could be into wrestling. So I'm not being facetious here. I think that this is a superior product, and it deserves a broader audience. And even these conversations, hopefully, part of building that movement. And I'm not territorial to just say it's just PWA. I recognise the great talent all around this country, and I think 100%. Right now, Mick Moretti started that campaign, hashtag You're Going to Notice Us. And the world's attention is clearly on the caliber of wrestlers that have been produced in this country because of the fact that they've been picked up by overseas promotions and so forth. So there's more to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, as I said, it's probably a couple of years still to go. But PWA just seems like it's on the right path. And there's other promotions out there. In Australia, some are very, very good on the similar level to a PWA. You look at MCW in Melbourne. There's EPW in Adelaide. I think it is. Is it Adelaide? Yeah.
Yeah.
EPW. Yeah, Adelaide. Yeah.
You say WA up in Perth and ECW. Is that Perth? Perth, sorry, and AWA.
I think EPW. I'm not too sure, but
a lot of acronyms.
Yeah, there's a lot of acronyms. There's a lot of three-letter slogans, so it's hard to remember them all. But
here's an innovative idea. Someone should come up with a wrestling promotion that's got 4 names. You got 4 letters in the acronym. Just revolutionise the industry,
dude. It's already been done.
Oh, there you go.
World-class championship wrestling, the Von Erichs. Yeah. But it hasn't been done for a couple of decades. So fuck it, let's do it again.
And just very briefly, I do want to make particular mention of the creative. Everyone likes to think that they do things well, but I do genuinely believe that there is a strong connection in our company with what is an Australian sense of humour, and I think that very seamlessly you see that in the shows that it can move into more comedic moments to more intense moments, and it feels integrated. But there's an Australianness to what was done, and sometimes it's prophetic, like the campaign for sanitation commissioner between when he was Tree Hugger Lucci and Big Fudge. Yeah. And who knew that within a year we'd be doing small promo videos from Big Fudge lecturing people on good sanitation habits in a pandemic. And we were the only company who had a commissioner ready to go, and you want to know why we've got good COVID results in Australia. I think PWO is a huge part of that. And Big Fudge, I take my lucha mask off to you.
No, absolutely, man. Big Fudge, he's the true hero, man. Not all superheroes wear capes.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. And the creative, I think the PWA Premiership is it's a really pure form of what we do, and it's wearing for me because it's a lot of time spent sitting next to Rose. It really is. And but the way that you've seen that build to the crescendo when it resumes on the 11th of January over the next 2 weeks, and then everyone's on tenterhooks as to what the actual premiership is. Is it a state of mind? Is
it number one contendership? Is it
a pewter cup? Is it shares in BHP? But whatever it is, all will be revealed, and it will be coveted, Piers. It will be coveted. Wahlberg will win it. By the way, I should mention Wahlberg will win it, but
you know what? I've got a feeling, and this is kind of like my prediction, and you probably might. I reckon it's going to come down to Wahlberg and Moretti.
Well, there's a lot of people that wants to see that, me included, to see Moretti get his comeuppance and Rose as well. But it's like I feel that Moretti has been in good shape all the way through, whereas Matthews had a couple of setbacks. So if you get a chance to go back and look at his match against Lucci, that head stomp is to die for. But I think Jess Troy has been consistently good.
Oh yeah,
Matt Rogers. I have a feeling his time is kind of now. I look forward to the day where I actually get to actually look Matt Rogers in the eye, because I haven't got the courage to yet. And I figure if he wins the premiership, he might lighten up a bit. And I also want to give a huge shout out. One of the unintended benefits of the global pandemic is, people sort of being where they are. And so Kyle Fletcher, the Aussie Arrow, and Charlie Evans, both, now residing in Australia because they can't really get back to England at the moment. We've been really fortunate. And Charlie Evans has just been a beast in this tournament. So,
absolutely.
Meridian Wahlberg, we probably will have to go to the Hordern Pavilion. There you go. Adelaide is Wrestle Rampage. EPW is Perth. Thank you, Clive.
There you
go. It's there are so many permutations, let me tell you.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that overall the PWA Premiership has just been, it's been something unique, and it's been something different, and that's the thing I'll give to PWA, is they do things that hasn't been done 100 times before in like the pro wrestling world, like trying to do something new and innovative. And I think the PWA Premiership, like when I was sitting down there, like when it started, I was going through the rules of the tournament, how it works, like 1 point for a draw. You know what I mean? Like it made even the draws, like when, you don't usually see a lot of draws in pro wrestling, you know, like where you saw that a couple of times in the PWA tournament, and it's like, you know what I mean? Like you saw like how the work that went into it is like, I just wanted to get that extra point, but you know what I mean? Like to walk away with 1 point, it's like you still get something out of a draw.
I think the strategy is really interesting, and God knows how the wrestlers keep track of the time. They don't have the benefit of seeing the WrestlerMerch.com 5-minute warning that we see. But there has to, things have to accelerate. I mean, if you can see a difference between, they're all part of Speed Force, but Matt Rogers sounds a bit cliche, but he's a power game as opposed to the speed, agility stuff of the velocities. But, in a sense, Rogers is focused on getting things done in a short amount of time, whereas the more athletic, distance wrestlers, the 10 minutes just must go like that, because they've got to get to that point they need to be to win within that time frame. So it alters what you do, and I think when you get a sense of where you are, I mean, it is a little bit like chess in that you can get out with a draw, and sometimes you must make a decision. And let me tell you, I think Lyrebird Lucci makes a decision before he enters the ring that I'm going to spend as much time out of this goddamn ring as possible, drive my opponent nuts, and at worst, I'll get away with a draw and I might just sneak a victory. So it brings a dimension to the approach to the matches that certainly me as a commentator has only, and I'm sure Rose, again, rarely we agree, but he'll agree on this. It's been quite thrilling for us to actually try and understand something that's a little bit beyond the normal. I've got to win. I must win this match.
Yeah, I mean, it puts more of a strategic thought around the tournament as itself.
And also you can see, to me, some of the emerging wrestlers. I know she's had a tough tournament, Kingsley, but a Kingsley or Jimmy Townsend or these guys over the course of the tournament, Billy Preston, who's still trying to define his style because, he wants to move on from his schoolboy ways. Though why he'd want to, because you know what, Piers? Nobody kicks out of the schoolboy.
Nobody.
But is really interesting that I feel over the 5 rounds I've seen development in those individuals. So it's really like a hothouse. And must be, even if you don't walk away, with the shares in BHP, it's still got value. And so I'm sure that these wrestlers have all, to the best they can when they're getting beat up so much, enjoyed themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's, the tournament, like, it must be a taxing tournament as well, because like I said, that 10 minutes, the training that we go in there was like, you got to go in there and wrestle solid for 10 minutes. Yeah, because it's like, because wrestling's entertainment. So, you don't really have much downtime in a pro wrestling match. It's go, go, go. And
I think I made the comment, Kai Drake, he's pretty much, his matches are pretty much all gone the distance, and he's carrying a lot of punishment. And that whereas Rogers has had a couple of quick ones, and therefore it's inevitable that you've got a little bit more in the tank. So, at times you just wonder whether sometimes, how they manage that physical resource in such a taxing way. But it'll be fascinating to see them come back from the break. I imagine a little bit refreshed and hopefully not victims of food comas.
Oh, mate, exactly. It's those food comas after Christmas, man. They're brutal. As we were talking before, my first workout back a couple of days after Christmas, that sucked for me. I was just seeing my belly just bouncing as on the treadmill. I was like, oh no.
I saw that online, mate. That's your home gym, I assume you were training in. Is that right?
No. That was I would not just yet, mate. Eventually we'll get there. But Kris, look, we have just passed.
Can I just ask you a question, Piers? What have you taken away from doing this show in 2020 that sort of carries you forward? I'm curious to know. What have you learned about pro wrestling in this year?
This year has been an eye-opening year for me, Kris. I've started this show. I've started another show called Wrestling with Tragedy with, a former ECW original, Angel Medina. And become more importantly, just than doing a podcast with a former ECW wrestler is becoming friends with Angel, and just hearing, and having a friendship with him and my buddy Kevin, who also does the show. We do the show together, and to have developed that and to where it's at right now is where we get told where you guys have achieved is astronomical, and it's because of the content that we're able to put out as a team together and working together. So that those friendships and learning about the business, Angel has probably smartened me up more about the certain aspects of the business. Don't be a fucking mark, know when when you're talking to people in the business, how to talk to them, certain things like that, where it's I've been able to sort of walk away going, okay, cool. If I'm in this situation with these people, this is the right way for me to behave or to carry myself as a human being, to not come across as you know what I mean? You want to come across respectful, but also, you give respect to get that sort of respect. And that's where I've really learned a lot about that. So I think definitely that would be the lines of it, and looking at pro wrestling and still being able to be a fan, but also be able to look and at the difference of shit that's, good pro wrestling and bad pro wrestling. But still, I'm a fan, and I'm not anyone to sort of slam any pro wrestler. So I'm a fan. I don't do what they do. That's at another level all to itself. So I think that a lot of fans need to understand that part as well in the world of wrestling.
I think that's really well said, and I think, look, particularly, I think the business in 2020, which has even faced challenges in the last 12 months about who it is from an ethical point of view and so forth, and you hope that good comes out of that. But I mean, if you look at the evolution of the business and the physical costs and the risks, and what people did and the sort of the less reputable side of the business, there is no doubt that professional wrestling is also always a microcosm of society, and it's, you can't just go, oh, I'm involved in professional wrestling and it's beyond reproach. It's actually not. Its foibles and its faults are fascinating and need to be addressed, and it's a complex beast. But at the heart of it, it's what you just touched on. It's what the performers do by way of training and performing, and the level of risk and the achievement and the joy that they reflect. That is why I love the business, and I'll always be keen to recognize and see areas for improvements where there are shortcomings. But this is just a great thing to be involved in, and in the very peripheral way that Rose and I get to be involved is fantastic. And I think that the patience that people are showing, I really hope that it's rewarded in 2021, and we get to toast that over a beer, mate.
Absolutely, man. And look, I appreciate and enjoy the work that you and Rose do as commentators. Because dude, you're more than welcome. You see the passion that you both have. You see the fun that you were having doing it, and it's not just a typical promoter, typical announcer going, yeah, and then he's picked him up, pile driver, slammed him. Yeah, no, okay, 1, 2, oh, yeah, kicks out. What a fucking okay, no. It's, you know what I mean? Like the banter and the comedic timing and the connection between you and Rose, that back and forth is what makes it really, really entertaining.
Well, thank you, mate. I mean, what's not to love? I get to wear a lot of shining jackets, and I look like a fashion plate next to a guy who somehow believes that drug dealer chic is a fashion statement. I mean, really? Come on now. Come on now. I mean, you're meant to looking classy. You know, I imitate the greats. I'm a Fred Blassie guy. You know, come on.
Dude, I dig your jackets, man. That was the thing. I was like, when I first came in that PWA show, I was like, saw the jacket, and I'm like, me and him just became friends, and he didn't even know it. I was like, that jacket's awesome.
And look, I'm looking for good tips for places to hire them from because I've already, cut a sway for a couple of costume shops, and they, funnily enough, a sort of like a guy is just, a 6'6" guy. It's not a huge range, you know what I mean? It's just, so I'm always looking for tips.
I could see you in like a Chris Jericho light up jacket, I think.
I think there's definitely there's a couple of dimensions you can go. You can go in actual moving pieces, but I'm also interested. Like I've done the sort of the flashy, glitzy stuff. Maybe something Doctor Strangey or some sort of pastel type arrangement. I want to investigate and broaden the palette in 2021, Piers.
Mate, I'm going to be excited to see what you're rocking in 2021, brother. But Kriss, look, we have just hit over that 1 hour mark. I am very appreciative of your time and just want to keep that mindful. Kriss, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. And to be quite honest, that hour and 15 minutes has just flown by. I feel like I could sit here and do a 2-3 hour interview with you easily.
Well, you're very kind. You wouldn't want to do that to yourself. It's been a lot of fun to shoot the shit with you uncensored. Thank you to the Multi-Continental Wrestling Alliance and Joel Southgate. Whatever you do not put your money on the Knights. I mean, come on now. Just be sensible.
Absolutely, man. Just no one wants to back the Knights. And Ben Anderson in the house. Thank you very much, sir, for tuning in.
Ben Anderson, I get it right, honestly. Sorry, Ben. Sometime. And look, can't wait. Anytime anyone who's watching this, listening to this is at a show, please come up. Love to say hello. Hear what you've got to say.
Absolutely, guys. And look, special thanks to the audience for tuning in tonight and checking this interview out. It's been a pleasure having you guys all here, being interactive. Huge shout out to my sponsors, A-Rock Designs and Signal Studios. Please go make sure you hit those companies up. Run by amazing people, and they do amazing products at an amazing price as well. So, Kriss, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. We got to do this again. But thank you again, man.
Thank you, Piers. Happy New Year.
Same to you guys. Have a happy New Year, everyone. Take care. Bye.